My name is Samantha Rivers, and at 34, I thought I had everything figured out. A successful marketing career, a beautiful 1,920 seconds colonial home I had painstakingly saved for, and a relationship that seemed to be heading somewhere solid. That was until I decided to catch an early flight home from Chicago, eager to surprise my boyfriend after closing a major client deal ahead of schedule. As I turned onto my quiet street, an uneasy feeling settled in my stomach at the sight of unfamiliar trucks parked in my driveway. Nothing could have prepared me for what waited behind my own front door. Before I continue with my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to hear more stories about family boundaries being shattered in the most unbelievable ways. I've always been what you might call a workaholic. After graduating with my marketing degree, I climbed the corporate ladder with laser focus, putting in 60-hour weeks and sacrificing vacations to prove myself. By 30, I was leading my own team at a prestigious agency in Boston, handling accounts for national brands. While my colleagues bought designer clothes or took exotic vacations, I funneled every spare dollar into my house fund. The housing market in Massachusetts isn't exactly forgiving, but after 7 years of aggressive saving and a promotion to executive level, I finally found her a 1,920 seconds colonial with original hardwood floors, crown molding, and a wraparound porch that made my heart skip a beat the moment I saw it. The realtor warned that it needed TLC, but where others saw outdated fixtures and worn floors, I saw character and history. I outbid 3 other buyers and nearly cried when I received the keys. For the next year, I poured my soul into that house. I researched period-appropriate paint colors, scoured antique shops for doorknobs that matched the originals, and spent weekends carefully refinishing the oak banister by hand. Every light fixture, every piece of furniture was selected to honor the home's history, while making it comfortably mine. My coworkers thought I was crazy to spend so much time on old things, but my home became my sanctuary, the place where I could escape marketing metrics and client demands. Then there was my sister, Megan, 29, perpetually between jobs, and somehow always the center of attention in our family. Growing up, we were like oil and water. While I was the careful, responsible one who saved birthday money and kept toys in their original boxes, Megan was all impulse and chaos. She'd borrow my clothes without asking and return them stained. Once, she used my college application essay as scratch paper. Another time, she redecorated my bedroom while I was at a weekend study group, convinced that hot pink walls would be a fun surprise. Our parents never seemed to notice these boundary violations. "She's just expressing herself," they'd say. Or, "Don't be so uptight, Sam." When Megan dropped out of college to find herself through a series of expensive hobbies, they covered her rent. When she totaled her car, they bought her a new one. Meanwhile, I worked through school, took out loans, and built my life through careful planning and hard work. Last Thanksgiving, I hosted our family dinner at my newly renovated home. Everyone seemed impressed except Megan. As I gave them the tour, showing off the original glass doorknobs I'd spent months tracking down and the vintage-inspired kitchen tiles, Megan trailed behind, making little comments just loud enough for me to hear. "It's very old-fashioned, isn't it?" she said, running a finger along my restored mantelpiece. "Don't you think open concept would work better in this space? All these walls make it so claustrophobic." Later, as I served pumpkin pie on my grandmother's china, she sighed dramatically. "I wish I could afford a house. It must be nice having all this space to yourself, while some of us are stuck in tiny apartments." My boyfriend Jason squeezed my hand under the table. He'd heard enough about my relationship with Megan to recognize the pattern, how she could twist any achievement of mine into either an insult or a personal injury to her. We'd been dating for almost 2 years, and while he was supportive, he also tended to encourage me to let things go rather than addressing them. "She's just jealous," he whispered as we cleared dishes together. "Take it as a compliment." The Chicago trip wasn't supposed to end early. I'd packed for a full week, prepared my presentation meticulously, and arranged for my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, to water my houseplant. The Landmark Group was a potential client we'd been courting for months, and landing their business would mean a substantial bonus enough to finally replace the aging HVAC system in my house. The presentation went better than expected. The client loved our concepts, signed the contract on the spot, and suddenly the 3 additional days of meetings I'd planned were unnecessary. With a free weekend ahead, I decided to surprise Jason. He was visiting his parents in Springfield, but would be back Friday night. I'd be waiting with takeout from our favorite restaurant, and the good news about my bonus. I didn't tell anyone I was coming home early. Not Jason, not my parents, not my assistant who thought I was still in Chicago. The only person who knew my flight had landed was the rideshare driver who dropped me at the airport rental counter. The drive home was filled with anticipation. Spring had come early to Massachusetts, and the trees along the highway were budding with fresh green. I hummed along to the radio, planning the small renovations my bonus would cover. The vintage-style radiator covers I'd been eyeing. Maybe finally restoring the original built-in bookshelves in the study. It wasn't until I turned onto my street that the first hint of wrongness appeared. A large dumpster sat at the curb near my house, overflowing with what looked like building materials. 2 unmarked white vans and a truck from Modern Edge Contracting occupied my driveway and stretched along the curb. For a moment, I thought I'd turned onto the wrong street, but there was my blue front door with the brass knocker I'd polished to a shine. As I pulled up behind the last van, a man in paint-splattered clothes emerged from my garage, carrying what appeared to be my grandmother's antique floor mirror, the one that had hung in my entryway since move-in day. He unceremoniously tilted it into the dumpster, the sound of breaking glass cutting through the quiet afternoon. I practically leapt from my rental car, leaving the driver's door hanging open as I raced toward the dumpster. The worker, a burly man with a salt and pepper beard, startled when I shouted, "What are you doing? That's an antique!" My voice came out higher than I intended, tight with panic as I peered into the dumpster. The mirror lay in pieces atop a pile of what I now recognized as my carefully refinished kitchen cabinets. The worker scratched his head. "Sorry, ma'am, just following orders. All the old stuff goes." "Whose orders?" I demanded, already dreading the answer. A sinking feeling spread through my chest as I turned toward my house. The front door stood wide open, and now I could hear the unmistakable sound of power tools coming from inside. "The owner," he replied with a shrug. "The lady who's been here all week directing the renovation." I didn't bother correcting him about who the actual owner was. Instead, I sprinted up the walkway and through my front door, only to freeze in the entryway, or what used to be my entryway. The wall separating my foyer from the living room was half demolished, exposing splintered lath and plaster. The hardwood floors I'd spent 3 weekends hand sanding and refinishing were covered in protective plastic sheeting, now filthy with boot prints and construction dust. The vintage wallpaper in the hallway William Morris reproduction that cost me a small fortune had been stripped away, leaving bare, scraped walls. I moved further inside, each step revealing new horrors. The built-in china cabinet that had sold me on the house was simply gone, leaving a gaping rectangular void in the dining room wall. My living room furniture had been pushed to the center and covered with plastic sheeting, creating the effect of a shrouded island in a sea of destruction. 2 workers I didn't recognize were removing the original crown molding from my dining room, while another was measuring the archway between rooms, presumably to remove that as well. "Excuse me, what is going on here?" I demanded, my voice echoing strangely in the now open space. The workers exchanged glances, clearly confused by my presence. One stepped forward, a young man with a clipboard. "Are you a friend of Miss Rivers?" he asked. "I am Miss Rivers, Samantha Rivers. I own this house." My hands shook as I fumbled for my ID, suddenly feeling like I needed to prove my ownership of my own home. "Who authorized this work?" Before he could answer, a familiar voice called from the kitchen. "Sam, is that you?" And there she was, my sister Megan, casually leaning against what remained of my kitchen doorway, wearing paint-splattered designer jeans and holding an iced coffee. Beside her stood a thin woman with architectural glasses and a severe bob, holding what appeared to be design plans. "Surprise," Megan sang out, arms wide as if expecting me to be delighted. "You're back early. We were hoping to be further along before you got home." I stood speechless, unable to process the casual way she was standing in the midst of what looked like a war zone. "What have you done?" Each word felt like it was being forced through a narrow straw as I struggled to maintain composure. Megan rolled her eyes, completely missing or ignoring my distress. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. I'm helping you update this old place. You know I've always had an eye for design." She gestured to the woman beside her. "This is Tiffany from Modern Edge Design. She's been amazing with the concept." Tiffany extended a manicured hand that I didn't take. "Your sister has wonderful vision. We're creating an open concept flow that will increase your property value by at least 15%. I finally found my voice. "I didn't ask for an open concept. I didn't ask for any of this." I gestured wildly at the destruction surrounding us. "How did you even get in?" "Mom and Dad gave me the spare key you left them," Megan said with a dismissive wave. "Don't worry. I made copies so the crew could get in while I was picking out materials." The casual way she admitted to making unauthorized copies of my house keys nearly sent me over the edge. I pushed past her into the kitchen and felt my knees go weak. My vintage-inspired kitchen, the room I'd spent the most time and money perfecting, was gutted. The custom cabinets I'd commissioned from a local woodworker were gone. The 1,920 appropriate subway tile backsplash had been smashed away. In their place, sleek white cabinetry was being installed, along with gray concrete countertops. "Where are my cabinets?" I managed to ask, already knowing the answer after seeing them in the dumpster. "Those old things? They were so impractical, Sam. The new ones have soft close hinges and built-in organizers." Megan walked over to demonstrate a cabinet feature, as if she were hosting a showroom tour. "And wait until you see the waterfall island we're putting in. It's going to be stunning." "And who is paying for all this?" I asked, though the sick feeling in my stomach already told me the answer. Megan had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable for the first time. "Well, I put some materials on your home improvement store account. I figured since it's your house, and this is increasing your property value." She brightened again. "But don't worry, I'm contributing my design services for free. Tiffany's normally charges thousands just for a consultation." I turned slowly, taking in the full scope of the destruction. The breakfast nook where I drank my coffee every morning had been demolished. The antique light fixture I'd restored was gone, replaced by contemporary pendant lights still in their boxes on the floor. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the sound of a saw starting up somewhere in the house. "About 5 days now," Megan replied cheerfully. "We've been making amazing progress. I've been documenting everything for Instagram. My followers are loving the transformation posts." The thought of my home being broadcast on social media without my knowledge or consent was the final straw. Something inside me snapped. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" Megan tilted her head, confused. "Get out!" I screamed, my voice breaking. "All of you! Stop working immediately and get out of my house." The workers froze, looking between me and Megan uncertainly. Tiffany cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," she suggested. "We've already ordered custom materials that can't be returned, and the deposits—" "I don't care about the deposits," I interrupted. "I didn't authorize any of this work. I want everyone out now, or I'm calling the police to report breaking and entering." One of the workers set down his tool. "Look, lady, we're just doing the job we were hired to do. We have a signed work order." I turned to Megan, who suddenly seemed very interested in her coffee cup. "You forged my signature?" "I didn't forge anything," she protested. "I just signed your name. I was doing you a favor, Sam. This place was embarrassingly outdated. You have terrible taste, and I was helping you fix it before you had Jason's parents over next month. You should be thanking me." I pulled out my phone and began dialing 911, holding it up so everyone could see. "Last chance, everyone out, or I report this as a break-in and destruction of property." The workers began gathering their tools, muttering among themselves. Tiffany handed me a business card with a tight smile. "Call me when you've calmed down." The demolition phase is always emotional for homeowners. As they filed out, I kept my phone ready, watching through tears as strangers trooped through my decimated home. When only Megan remained, I could barely look at her. "The key," I said, holding out my hand. "And any copies you made." "You're being ridiculous," she sighed, but dug in her pocket and dropped a key into my palm. "The crew has the others. I'll have to get them back tomorrow when they return." "They're not returning. Ever. This stops now." "But Sam, we can't just leave it like this. The kitchen is halfway demolished. What are you going to do?" I looked around at what remained of my beloved kitchen, fighting back a wave of nausea. "I'll figure it out. Without your help." "Mom and Dad paid the initial deposit as a surprise for you," she added, as if this would somehow make everything better. "They thought you'd be pleased." The betrayal cut even deeper. My own parents had funded this destruction. "Get out, Megan. We'll discuss the money later." "You're being so ungrateful right now," she said, gathering her purse with an injured air. "I took time off work for this project. I created the most amazing design boards. I was helping you." I didn't trust myself to respond, simply pointing to the door. After she finally left, I locked it behind her, then sank to the floor among the construction debris and sobbed until I had no tears left. I spent that first night in a daze, wandering from room to room in my dust-covered house, documenting the damage with shaking hands. Sleep was impossible. Every creak in the partially demolished walls sent adrenaline coursing through me. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and tried to salvage what I could from the dumpster, working by flashlight, to avoid attracting attention from neighbors. My grandmother's mirror was beyond saving, but I managed to pull out some of the original doorknobs and a few pieces of crown molding. By morning, my shock had crystallized into white-hot rage. I'd spent the sleepless night calculating rough estimates of the damage, reviewing my bank and credit card statements, and discovering the full extent of Megan's help. Not only had she charged thousands to my home improvement store account, but she'd also opened a line of credit in my name at a kitchen and bath showroom. The total unauthorized spending exceeded $20,000 already, with apparently more materials on order. At 7:15 a.m., I called the contracting company and spoke with the owner, explaining that the work had been commissioned fraudulently. He was sympathetic but firm about their policies. Deposits were non-refundable, and I was still liable for materials already ordered. When I mentioned potential legal action, his tone changed. He promised to send over all paperwork and suggested I take it up with the person who had signed the contracts. At 7:30, as I was making coffee in my partially destroyed kitchen, using the only outlet that still worked, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Megan standing there with 2 oat milk lattes and a bright smile, as if yesterday had never happened. "I brought breakfast," she chirped, attempting to step past me. "And I had some thoughts overnight about the backsplash. I think we should consider a herringbone pattern instead of—" I blocked the doorway. "You're not coming in." "Don't be ridiculous, Sam. We have contractors arriving at 8. We need to go over the revised timeline since we lost yesterday afternoon." She tried again to step around me. "There is no we in this situation," I said, my voice deadly calm. "The contractors have been informed that they are not authorized to continue work. You committed fraud by signing my name to contracts and opening credit accounts without my permission." Megan's smile faltered, then returned with forced brightness. "You're still upset. I get it. Change is scary. But once you see the finished product—" "I saw your Instagram posts," I cut in. Sometime around 4 a.m., I'd found her social media accounts and spent a sickening hour scrolling through dozens of photos and videos documenting the destruction of my home. #renovation rescue? #intervention? You made me look like some pathetic hoarder clinging to garbage. "I never used the word hoarder," she protested. "I just said you had an unhealthy attachment to outdated aesthetics." My followers totally agreed that the intervention was necessary. "Your followers don't know me. They don't know that every single piece you mocked was carefully chosen. That mirror you threw away? It belonged to our grandmother. She rolled her eyes. It was scratched and the silvering was coming off the back. It was an antique. I felt my composure slipping. That's what happens to antiques. They show their age, their history. Not everything needs to be brand new and trendy and disposable. A contractor's truck pulled up at the curb, and I saw two workers get out, looking uncertainly toward the house. Megan waved enthusiastically at them. "We'll be right with you," she called, then turned back to me with a hiss. "Stop making a scene in front of the workers. Let's discuss this inside like adults." "There's nothing to discuss. They're not coming in, and neither are you." I pulled out my phone. "Leave now, or I call the police and report you for fraud, breaking and entering, and destruction of property." Her expression darkened. "You wouldn't dare. Can you imagine what that would do to Mom and Dad, to the family?" "What about what you've done to me?" My voice broke. "To my home? Did you think about that even once?" "I was helping you," she shouted, finally dropping the cheerful facade. "That's what you don't understand. Your house was an embarrassment. Jason even said so." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Jason? What does Jason have to do with this?" Megan's eyes widened slightly, realizing her mistake. "Nothing. I just meant, what did Jason say exactly?" I demanded. She shifted uncomfortably. "We were just talking at Easter, and he mentioned that while he loves your house, he thought some updates might make it more livable. Especially if you two were thinking about the future." The betrayal cut deep. Jason had always said he loved my house. Had he been lying? Had he and my sister been discussing me behind my back? I filed this revelation away to deal with later. "Get the contractors to leave," I said flatly. Now, something in my expression must have convinced her I was serious. She sighed dramatically and walked over to the workers, engaging in an animated conversation that involved much gesturing toward me. After several minutes, they got back in their truck and drove away. Megan returned, arms crossed. "Happy now? They're charging us a cancellation fee." "They can bill you directly," I replied. "Now I want every key you made, the contact information for all the companies you've engaged, and copies of every contract you signed in my name." "I don't have all that with me," she huffed. "Then go get it, and do not come back without it." My phone rang my mother's ringtone. I declined the call. It immediately rang again. "You called Mom?" I accused. "Of course I called Mom. You're being completely unreasonable, and someone needs to talk sense into you." I answered the phone on speaker. "Hello, Mom. Samantha, what on earth is going on? Megan says you're threatening to call the police on her." Megan broke into my house while I was away on business, destroyed my property, charged thousands to my accounts without permission, and is now standing on my porch refusing to leave. "What would you call that?" "She was helping you renovate," my mother replied, as if explaining something to a child. "We all agreed your house needed updating. The key was for emergencies, yes, but this was a wonderful surprise. Your father and I contributed to the costs as an early birthday present." "A present I never asked for," I said through gritted teeth. "Mom, she destroyed things that mattered to me. She threw grandmother's mirror in a dumpster. That old thing? Honey, it was falling apart, and you can't possibly want to keep all those dark wooden cabinets and tiny divided rooms. It's not practical for modern living." I closed my eyes, realizing I would get no support from this quarter. "Mom, I need to go. I have to call my insurance company and see what's covered." "Insurance? Samantha, you're overreacting. Just let Megan finish what she started. The mess is the worst part of renovation. Once it's done, you'll love it." "No, Mom, it's over. The project is canceled. And I'd appreciate if both you and Dad would respect that this is my house and my decision." I hung up before she could respond, then turned back to Megan, who had been listening with a smug expression. "See? Even Mom thinks you're being ridiculous." "Keys, contracts, contact information," I repeated. "Bring them to me by the end of the day. After that, do not contact me until I contact you." I shut the door in her face and locked it, then sank to the floor, back against the door, as my phone exploded with texts and calls. Through the front window, I could see Megan still standing on the porch, furiously typing on her phone. Moments later, My father's name appeared on my caller ID. I turned off my phone. The next morning dawned bright and clear. A beautiful spring day that stood in stark contrast to the chaos inside my home. I'd spent most of the night researching insurance policies and contractors, specializing in historic restoration, stopping only when my laptop battery died. With electricity unreliable in half the house, I'd resorted to using camping equipment from the basement, a battery lantern for light, and a camp stove to heat water for instant coffee. I started in the kitchen, notepad in hand, methodically documenting every single item that had been removed or damaged. The custom cabinets, $8,500. Vintage-inspired subway tile, $1,200. Period. Appropriate flooring, $3,700. The list grew longer with each room I entered. In the dining room, the built-in china cabinet had been completely removed, leaving only a jagged hole in the wall. Fragments of the original wainscoting lay discarded in a corner. The chandelier I'd restored myself, spending weekends carefully rewiring the 1,930 seconds fixture, had been replaced by a modern pendant light that would have looked more appropriate in a downtown loft than a colonial home. The living room had fared slightly better, though the partial wall removal had left lath and plaster debris everywhere. My furniture remained intact under the plastic sheeting, though coated with a thick layer of construction dust. The original crown molding had been partially removed, with stacks of contemporary replacements waiting to be installed. Upstairs, I discovered more evidence of Megan's vision. The bathroom renovation had already begun, with my clawfoot tub reglazed at significant expense just 6 months ago, sitting forlornly in the hallway, apparently destined for the dumpster. In its place, a massive glass and tile shower enclosure was being assembled, consuming nearly half the modest bathroom's footprint. By midday, I had filled pages with itemized damage and made dozens of phone calls. The news was consistently bad. The insurance company explained that while they covered damage from unexpected events like fires or burst pipes, they specifically excluded improvements and betterments even if unauthorized. Since the damage was intentional renovation rather than vandalism, I would have limited coverage at best. Multiple restoration contractors told me the same thing. Fixing the damage properly would cost far more than the original renovations. Historic materials were expensive and hard to source. Skilled craftspeople who understood old home construction commanded premium rates. One estimator's ballpark figure for complete restoration topped $80,000, far more than I had available, even counting the bonus I'd just earned. As I sat at my dust-covered dining table reviewing my notes, my phone buzzed with incoming texts. I'd turned it back on reluctantly, needing to make calls, and immediately received a flood of messages from family members. From Megan: left paperwork in your mailbox. Still think you're making a huge mistake. These renos would have added serious value to your outdated house. From Mom: call us when you're ready to be reasonable. Your father and I are very disappointed in your reaction to a generous gift. From Dad: your mother is upset. Megan is crying. Is this really worth dividing the family over some old cabinets? From my cousin Rachel: saw Megan's renovation posts. Your house looks amazing. Why did you stop the project? Drama much? And most disturbingly, from Jason: hey babe, heard about the house situation from your mom. Let's talk when I get back tonight. Try not to make any permanent decisions until we can discuss, okay? The casual way everyone dismissed my feelings made me physically nauseous. Was I going insane? Was I truly being unreasonable about having my home invaded and altered without my consent? I was still struggling with these questions when my doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see my neighbor Mrs. Patterson, an 80-year-old retired librarian who had lived on the street for 50 years. I brought you some lunch, dear, she said, handing me a covered dish when I opened the door. I noticed all the commotion yesterday. Renovation going badly? The simple kindness nearly broke me. It's not my renovation, I explained, voice cracking. My sister took it upon herself to update my house while I was away on business. Without asking, Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened. Without permission? But that's breaking and entering, isn't it? Thank you, I whispered, tears threatening. Everyone else seems to think I should be grateful. She peered past me into the dusty foyer. May I come in? I went through something similar with my late sister in the 1980 seconds. Not a renovation, but, well, family can be complicated. Over Mrs. Patterson's homemade chicken noodle soup, I poured out the whole story. She listened attentively, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. Your home is your sanctuary, she said firmly when I finished. No one has the right to alter it without your consent, no matter how well-intentioned they claim to be. Her validation was like oxygen to a drowning person. For the first time since discovering the renovation, I felt like I wasn't crazy for being upset. Our conversation was interrupted by the sound of car doors slamming outside. Through the window, I saw my parents' SUV parked at the curb. Megan emerged from the passenger side, followed by my mother and father. "Oh dear," Mrs. Patterson murmured. "Would you like me to stay?" I nodded gratefully as the doorbell rang. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door to find my family standing there with determined expressions. "We're here to help resolve this situation," my father announced without preamble. "Your mother and I have been talking, and we think the best solution is to finish what's been started. We're prepared to contribute additional funds to expedite the work." "I'm not continuing the renovation," I replied firmly, "as I've already told Megan multiple times." "Don't be stubborn, Samantha," my mother sighed. "The damage is already done. Does it really make sense to leave your house in this state just to prove a point?" "It's not about proving a point. It's about the fact that Megan invaded my home, destroyed things that mattered to me, and committed fraud by signing my name to contracts and credit applications." Megan rolled her eyes dramatically. Always so melodramatic. "It's called a surprise makeover, not fraud." "Actually," Mrs. Patterson interjected from behind me, "it is fraud, and breaking and entering, and destruction of property. I used to work with contract law in the university library system, and what you've described could potentially result in criminal charges." My family stared at the elderly woman in surprise, clearly not having noticed her presence until now. "And who might you be?" my father asked stiffly. "Marion Patterson. I've lived next door for 50 years and watched Samantha restore this lovely home with extraordinary care. I must say, I'm shocked at how cavalier you all seem about violating her property rights." My mother's expression hardened. "This is a family matter, Mrs. Patterson. We appreciate your concern, but did you know that unauthorized renovation fraud is becoming increasingly common?" Mrs. Patterson continued pleasantly, as if delivering a library lecture. "Just last year, there was a case in Vermont where a sister-in-law was ordered to pay $142,000 in damages for a similar situation. I had no idea if this was true, but the effect on my family was immediate. My father's confident stance faltered, and Megan's smug expression gave way to uncertainty. "No one is talking about legal action," my father said quickly. "We're trying to find a family solution. A solution that respects Samantha's wishes would seem most appropriate," Mrs. Patterson suggested mildly. "We have contractors on standby," Megan cut in, clearly trying to regain control of the conversation. "They can be here tomorrow to continue the work. The kitchen cabinets are already paid for and being delivered next week." "Cancel them," I said firmly. "I'll handle my house my way, even if that means living with exposed drywall for a while." "This is ridiculous," Megan exploded. "I did all this work for you. I created design boards. I coordinated with contractors. I even set up a whole social media series about the renovation. My followers are invested in the outcome." "Your social media followers don't live here." "I do. Jason thinks the open concept looks great," she shot back. "He saw the progress photos and texted me that it's exactly what the house needed." The mention of Jason's name silenced me momentarily. So he had been in contact with Megan throughout this process? The betrayal cut deep. Taking my silence as weakening resolve, Megan pressed on. "He particularly likes the kitchen plans. Said it would be perfect for entertaining, which you know he loves to do." "Get out," I said quietly. "All of you." "Samantha," my mother began in her warning tone. "No, I'm done discussing this. This is my house. Mine. Not yours, not Megan's, and not Jason's. If you can't respect that, Then leave. You're making a huge mistake, Megan said, her voice cold. And when you realize it, don't come crying to me to fix it. I think that's quite enough, Mrs. Patterson interjected. Samantha has made her position clear. I suggest you respect her wishes before this situation escalates further. My father, ever conscious of appearances, especially in front of strangers, finally relented. We'll give you some space to calm down and think rationally. Call us when you're ready to discuss real solutions. As they turned to leave, Megan paused on the threshold. By the way, I took some of your vintage doorknobs and light fixtures home before they could be thrown away. Thought they might be sentimental to you. Her air quotes around the word made her contempt clear. Let me know if you want them back. Otherwise, I might use them in my apartment. The casual admission that she had removed items from my home without permission and was now essentially holding them hostage left me speechless. Before I could respond, they were gone, the SUV pulling away from the curb with a squeal of tires. Mrs. Patterson patted my shoulder gently. Family can be our greatest comfort or our greatest trial. Sometimes both at once. Through the window, I watched my family drive away, wondering how the people who were supposed to love me most could so completely dismiss my feelings and violate my boundaries. More troublingly, I wondered about Jason's role in all this. Had he been encouraging Megan behind my back? What else had they discussed without my knowledge? I would find out soon enough. According to his text, he'd be home tonight. Jason arrived shortly after 8 that evening, letting himself in with his key. I was sitting in the partially demolished living room, surrounded by dust and construction debris, a single lamp casting long shadows across the exposed beams and damaged walls. "Babe?" he called, his footsteps hesitant as he navigated through the foyer. "Are you home?" "In here," I replied, not bothering to get up. He appeared in the doorway, overnight bag still in hand, eyes widening as he took in the destruction. "Wow. Your mom mentioned renovations, but I didn't realize it was this extensive. Did you know?" I asked, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears. "Did you know what Megan was planning?" Jason set down his bag, his expression guarded. "Not exactly. I mean, she mentioned wanting to surprise you with some updates, but I didn't know details." "Try again," I said, holding up my phone to show him the text conversation I'd found between him and my sister. It had taken some detective work. Megan had deleted most of their exchanges from my phone when she'd had access to it during the renovation, but she'd forgotten about the cloud backup. The messages weren't comprehensive, but they were damning enough. Jason to Megan. "Just don't touch the bedroom or office. She'll completely freak if her workspace gets changed. Kitchen and living areas should be fine." Megan to Jason. "Trust me, she'll thank us later. Open concept is so much better for entertaining. Plus her style is straight out of a grandma museum." Jason to Megan. "True. Just be prepared for the initial meltdown. You know how she gets about her historic preservation kick." I watched his face as he read the exchange, saw the moment he realized there was no explaining this away. "Sam, I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you conspired with my sister behind my back. How you belittled my passion for historic homes as a kick. How you gave her permission to destroy my property because apparently you know better than I do what I want in my own home." "That's not fair," he protested. "I didn't give permission. Megan was going to do this regardless. I just tried to minimize the damage by telling her to leave your personal spaces alone. So rather than warning me, your girlfriend, that my sister was planning to break into my house and demolish it, you decided to help her? I thought you might actually like it once it was done. Your style is." He gestured vaguely at the room. "It's very specific, and not exactly practical for the future." "What future?" I asked, though I already knew what he meant. "Our future, Sam. If we're going to live together eventually, maybe start a family. I mean, these tiny rooms with no flow, all these antiques that can't be touched. It's not exactly kid-friendly." The presumption took my breath away. "Did it ever occur to you to discuss this with me? To ask what I wanted in my own home? Or did you and Megan just decide you knew better?" Jason ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "You're impossible to talk to about this house. Every time I suggest even moving a lamp, you give a 20-minute lecture on period-appropriate lighting placement. It's exhausting. Then why are you with me? I asked quietly. If my passion for my home is so exhausting, if my taste is so embarrassing that you had to secretly collaborate with my sister to change it, why are we even together? Because I love you, Sam. Even with your weird obsession with old stuff. He stepped toward me, reaching for my hand. Look, what Megan did was wrong. I get that. But maybe we can salvage something from this situation. The contractors said the kitchen demolition is already done, so we might as well. You've spoken to the contractors? I interrupted, pulling my hand away. He had the grace to look sheepish. I called them this afternoon to get a sense of where things stood, without talking to me first. Again, I was trying to help. No, I said, standing up. You were trying to control. Just like Megan, just like my parents. Everyone thinks they know better than me what I should want, how I should live, what would make me happy. That's not fair, Jason protested. We care about you. We want what's best for you. Best for me, according to whom? Because it seems like everyone's idea of what's best for me conveniently aligns with what they want. I walked to the window, staring out at the darkened street. Mrs. Patterson's lights were still on across the way, a warm glow in the evening darkness. In the reflection of the glass, I could see Jason standing uncertainly behind me, his expression a mixture of frustration and calculation, likely trying to figure out the fastest way to smooth this over. I think you should go, I said finally. Sam, come on. It's been a long day. Let's not make any rash decisions. It's not rash. It's actually long overdue. I turned to face him. This isn't just about the house, Jason. It's about respect. My sister violated my boundaries in the most dramatic way possible, and instead of standing up for me, you helped her. I didn't help her demolish your house. No, you just gave her pointers on which parts to destroy. I shook my head. And now, instead of acknowledging how deeply wrong that was, you're still trying to convince me to continue with her vision. Her unauthorized, unwanted vision for MY Home. Jason's expression hardened. So that's it? Years together? Thrown away over some cabinets and doorknobs? No. Years together, reconsidered because of what those cabinets and doorknobs represent. Trust, respect, agency over my own life and choices. You're being melodramatic, and you're being dismissive. Again, I walked to the door and opened it. Please leave. Take some time to think about whether you actually respect me and my choices, or just tolerate them until you can change them. After Jason left, I sat alone in my partially destroyed home, surrounded by the physical manifestation of my family's disregard for my boundaries. My phone continued to buzz with messages from Jason, from Megan, from my parents, even from extended family members who had seen Megan's renovation posts and were taking sides in a conflict they barely understood. Around midnight, I opened Instagram and searched for Megan's account. I hadn't looked at social media since discovering the initial renovation posts, too overwhelmed by the reality in front of me to face the online narrative. What I found now made me physically ill. Megan had documented every step of the surprise makeover in excruciating detail. Photos of my carefully chosen antiques labeled as grandma junk. Videos of workers ripping out my custom cabinets while Megan narrated, finally getting rid of these dark, depressing monsters. A time-lapse of the wall demolition captioned, "Opening up this claustrophobic layout. Who actually wants all these unnecessary walls?" Worse were the comments. Hundreds of strangers weighing in on my home, my taste, my life. "Oh my God, your sister is so lucky to have you. That house was straight out of the 1800s. I can't believe anyone would choose to live with those ancient fixtures. The new ones are gorgeous. Your sister might be mad at first, but she'll thank you later." Sometimes people don't know what they actually need until someone braver makes the decision for them. And perhaps most painfully, is your sister single? My house needs this kind of intervention too. The casual cruelty, the complete dismissal of my agency, the celebration of boundary violation as some kind of heroic act of tough love. It was overwhelming. I scrolled through post after post, comment after comment, feeling increasingly disconnected from reality. Was I truly the unreasonable one here? Was my attachment to my carefully restored home really so bizarre, so worthy of mockery and intervention? Sleep deprived and emotionally exhausted, I found myself questioning my own reactions. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just stuff. Maybe I should be grateful for Megan's help, for Jason's guidance, for my parents' financial contribution to a renovation I never wanted. But then I remembered Mrs. Patterson's words. Your home is your sanctuary. No one has the right to alter it without your consent. That single validation, from a near stranger, somehow outweighed all the gaslighting from the people who were supposed to love me most. In the early hours of the morning, I drove to my parents' house. The family dinner I'd initially refused to attend would be starting soon. Sunday dinner was a tradition, even amid family conflict. I needed to face them all at once, to make my position clear, to end the cycle of manipulation and boundary violation that had defined our relationship for as long as I could remember. As I pulled into the familiar driveway, I saw Megan's car already there, along with my aunt and uncle's SUV. Perfect. An audience for whatever drama was about to unfold. My mother answered the door with surprise. Samantha, we didn't expect you. Come in. Dinner's almost ready. The normalcy of the greeting, as if nothing had happened, was surreal. I followed her into the dining room where my father, Megan, my Aunt Susan, Uncle Robert, and Cousin Rachel were already seated. The conversation stopped abruptly when I entered. Well, this is a nice surprise, my father said cautiously. We thought you were still processing things. I've processed plenty, I replied, remaining standing as everyone exchanged uncomfortable glances. Sam, we saved you a seat, Megan said with forced cheerfulness, patting the chair beside her. Mom made pot roast, your favorite. The sheer audacity to act as if we were just having a normal family dinner after everything that had happened broke something inside me. I'm not staying for dinner, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I came to say this once, clearly, to all of you. What you did, Megan, was wrong. Not just inconsiderate or misguided. Wrong. Legally and morally wrong. You violated my home, my trust, and my personal boundaries in a way that I cannot and will not forgive without significant changes. Megan's expression hardened. Here we go again with the dramatics. No, I cut her off sharply. You don't get to dismiss this as dramatics. You broke into my house. You destroyed property that I carefully selected and restored. You charged thousands of dollars to my accounts without permission. You threw away irreplaceable family heirlooms. And then you posted it all online for strangers to mock and comment on. I was helping you, Megan protested. Your house was stuck in a time warp. I made it livable for the modern era. It wasn't your decision to make, I replied. Just like it wasn't your decision to borrow my clothes in high school, or use my college application essay as scratch paper, or redecorate my bedroom without permission. My entire life, you violated my boundaries, and instead of facing consequences, you've been celebrated for it. I turned to my parents, and you two have enabled her at every turn. She's just being creative. She's just expressing herself. Why are you so uptight, Sam? Never once considering that I might have the right to my own possessions, my own space, my own choices. My mother's expression was a mixture of shock and indignation. We raised you both to share. No. You raised me to give and Megan to take. There's a difference. I took a deep breath. I want the items Megan took from my house returned immediately. I want full financial restitution for the damage caused. And I want acknowledgement from all of you that what happened was wrong. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, my father cleared his throat. Samantha, we understand you're upset, but don't you think you're overreacting a bit? In the grand scheme of things, it's just, if you say just stuff or just a house, I'm walking out that door and not coming back, I interrupted. It's my home, mine. The fact that none of you can understand or respect, that tells me everything I need to know about our relationship. Megan crossed her arms defensively. So what are you saying? That you'll cut us all off over some old cabinets and wallpaper? I looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time seeing the pattern that had defined our relationship for decades. I'm saying that unless you can acknowledge what you did was wrong, make amends, and commit to respecting my boundaries in the future, yes, we will have a very different relationship moving forward. If any relationship at all. My Aunt Susan, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Samantha, that's your family you're talking about. Blood is thicker than water. You can't just— Actually, I can. Being family doesn't give you the right to violate someone's home, possessions, or boundaries. It should mean the exact opposite, that you respect and protect those things more carefully, not less. I looked around the table at the faces of my family members, shocked, angry, defensive, but not a hint of genuine remorse or understanding. I'll be expecting those items Megan took by the end of the week. After that, I'll be consulting with an attorney about my options for financial restitution. I hope it doesn't come to that, but I'm done being the only one who compromises in this family. As I turned to leave, Megan called after me, her voice a mixture of anger and panic. What about Jason? Did you break up with him too over this nonsense? I paused at the doorway. Jason made his choice when he decided to conspire with you behind my back. He's welcome to join your renovation project, but it won't be in my house. The drive home was a blur, tears occasionally obscuring my vision despite my best efforts to maintain composure. But beneath the hurt and anger, I felt something unexpected, a sense of clarity, of weightlifting. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to my family's pattern of boundary violations and gaslighting. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms. Monday morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. The thought of putting on a professional face and discussing marketing strategies while my personal life lay in ruins was simply unbearable. My boss, Laura, was surprisingly understanding. "Take the week if you need it, Sam," she said after I gave her a sanitized version of events. "The landmark account is secure, and your team can handle the initial implementation. Focus on your house situation." With unexpected free time on my hands, I channeled my energy into reclaiming control of my life and home. First stop: a consultation with a lawyer specializing in property disputes. Rebecca Chen of Chen and Associates listened to my story without interruption, occasionally making notes, but otherwise maintaining a professionally neutral expression. "What you've described constitutes several potential causes of action," she explained when I finished. "Breaking and entering, destruction of property, fraud, unauthorized use of credit, the list goes on. The complicating factor, of course, is that the perpetrator is your sister, and your parents were involved as well." "Does that make a legal difference?" I asked. "Legally, no. Having a spare key doesn't authorize someone to make major alterations to your property without consent. Emotionally and practically, however." She gave me a knowing look. "Family lawsuits are messy and often traumatic for all involved. Before we go that route, let me outline some alternatives." Over the next hour, Rebecca helped me draft a formal demand letter requesting the return of all items removed from my home, full financial restitution for damages, and written acknowledgement of wrongdoing. She also suggested documentation strategies, photographs, contractor estimates, credit card statements, to strengthen my position should legal action become necessary. "Send this by certified mail so they can't claim they didn't receive it," she advised as I prepared to leave. "Give them 10 business days to respond. If they refuse or ignore it, we'll discuss next steps." My next stop was the local police station to file a report. The officer who took my statement was initially skeptical. Home invasions involving family members with keys fell into a gray area, but became more engaged as I described the extent of the destruction and unauthorized charges. "At minimum, we can document the incident," he explained, typing notes into his computer. "The unauthorized credit charges are the clearest criminal violation. I recommend contacting your credit card companies and the home improvement stores directly to dispute those charges." Armed with the police report number, I spent the afternoon on the phone with credit card companies and stores, painstakingly disputing each unauthorized charge. Most representatives were sympathetic once I explained the situation, though the process of reversing charges and closing fraudulently opened accounts was tedious and emotionally draining. By evening, I was exhausted but felt a growing sense of agency. I had taken concrete steps to address the situation, not just emotionally reacted to it. The demand letter was ready to send, the police report filed, the financial damage partially contained. Tomorrow, I would tackle the physical damage to my home. But first, I needed support of a different kind. On impulse, I called an old friend from college, Ava, who I'd gradually lost touch with over the past few years. Our friendship had drifted as I'd become more involved with Jason, who'd never quite clicked with my college friends. "Samantha Rivers, as I live and breathe," Ava exclaimed when she answered. "Please tell me you're calling because you finally dumped that boyfriend who always looked like he was sucking on a lemon whenever we mentioned traveling abroad." Despite everything, I laughed. "Actually, yes. Among other things. I need details. All of them. Are you free for dinner? I can be at that Thai place we used to love in 30 minutes. Over pad thai and spring rolls, I poured out the whole story. The unauthorized renovation, Megan's history of boundary violations, Jason's betrayal, my family's gaslighting, all of it. Ava listened with appropriate outrage, occasionally punctuating my narrative with creative curses directed at my sister and ex-boyfriend. "What kind of psychopath destroys someone's home without permission?" she demanded, gesturing emphatically with her chopsticks. "And then has the audacity to act like they've done you a favor? The kind who's been doing smaller versions of the same thing her entire life, and always being rewarded for it," I replied, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. "This isn't new behavior for Megan. It's just escalated to a level I can't ignore anymore." "And your parents seriously took her side?" "They always do. I'm the uptight one for having boundaries. Megan's the free spirit for ignoring them." Ava reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Well, I think you're handling this like a badass. Lawyer, police report, demand letter. You're not messing around." "I don't know if it will work," I admitted. "My family has a pretty strong immune response to consequences." "Doesn't matter. You're standing up for yourself. That's the win, regardless of how they respond." She took a sip of her Thai iced tea. "So, what's the plan for the house?" I sighed, thinking of the demolition debris still covering my floors, the exposed wiring where light fixtures had been removed, the kitchen with half its cabinets missing. "I have no idea. The proper restoration would cost a fortune. Insurance won't cover it. I can't even cook a proper meal right now." "Stay with me," Ava said without hesitation. "I have a spare bedroom that's just collecting dust. Stay while you figure out the renovation situation." I couldn't impose. It's not imposing if I'm offering. Besides, it'll be like senior year all over again, except with better wine and fewer exams. Her expression turned serious. "You shouldn't be rattling around that construction zone alone, especially after everything that's happened." That night, I packed an overnight bag and locked up my damaged house. As I followed Ava to her apartment, I felt a curious mixture of grief and liberation. Grief for the home I'd so carefully created, now in ruins. Liberation from the weight of toxic relationships I'd carried for far too long. Over the next few days, I established a new routine. Mornings were dedicated to practical matters, meeting with contractors to assess damage and provide estimates, researching historic home restoration resources, canceling renovation orders Megan had placed in my name. Afternoons were spent at work, where I threw myself into the landmark account implementation with renewed focus, grateful for the distraction of professional challenges. Evenings were for healing long conversations with Ava, rediscovering old friendships that had faded during my relationship with Jason, and sessions with a therapist specializing in family dynamics. Dr. Larson, a calm woman with silver-streaked hair and perceptive eyes, helped me recognize patterns I'd been too close to see. "What you're describing is a classic family system with rigid roles," she explained during our second session. "You were assigned the role of responsible caretaker, while your sister was the creative free spirit. These roles served a purpose in your family dynamic, which is why there's such resistance when you step outside yours." "By standing up for myself?" She nodded. "Exactly. When you refuse to accommodate boundary violations, you're disrupting a system that's been in place for decades. That creates discomfort for everyone involved, which is why the pressure to return to the old pattern is so intense. So what do I do? Give in to keep the peace? Peace at the cost of your autonomy isn't peace at all, she replied gently. The question is, are you willing to endure short-term conflict for the possibility of healthier relationships in the long term? Or are these relationships, as they currently exist, worth maintaining at the cost of your boundaries? It was a question I returned to repeatedly over the following weeks, as responses to my demand letter arrived in piecemeal fashion. Megan returned most of the items she'd taken from my house, though the vintage doorknobs arrived with several missing pieces. My parents sent a check covering about half the estimated restoration costs, with a note explaining they felt this was more than fair given the increased value from modernization. Jason attempted reconciliation multiple times, his approaches evolving from defensive, "I still think you overreacted," to seemingly contrite, "I should have respected your space." As the reality of our breakup sank in, through it all, I held firm to my boundaries, a task made easier by distance and the support of friends like Ava and Mrs. Patterson, who regularly invited me for tea and conversations about historic home preservation. "You know, I've been watching you restore that house for years," Mrs. Patterson remarked during one such visit. "Such care and respect for its history, for the craftsmanship of another era. It's rare to see in someone your age." "My sister thinks it's weird," I admitted. "Actually, most people do. Jason used to call it my grandma aesthetic." She sniffed dismissively. "Short-sighted. They're building houses today that won't last 30 years, with materials selected for cost rather than longevity. Your home has stood for a century, and, with proper care, will stand for another. There's wisdom in preserving such craftsmanship." Her words stayed with me as I began the slow process of repairing my home. Instead of rushing to fix everything at once, I took a methodical approach, researching each element thoroughly before proceeding. I joined the local historical society and connected with a network of craftspeople specializing in period restoration. Through them, I found a carpenter who could recreate my demolished built-ins using salvaged wood from the same era, a plasterer who understood traditional lathe and plaster techniques, and sources for historically accurate fixtures and materials. The financial reality meant compromises were necessary. I couldn't restore everything at once, so I prioritized structural repairs and essential spaces like the kitchen. Some of the damage would have to wait until my savings recovered. And in a few cases, I opted for modern solutions that honored the historic aesthetic, energy-efficient windows with divided light patterns that matched the originals, updated electrical systems hidden behind period-appropriate fixtures. Surprisingly, I discovered that some of Megan's changes, once stripped of the context of violation, had merit. The increased kitchen storage, achieved without the full open-concept demolition, actually improved functionality. The updated bathroom lighting brightened the space while maintaining its vintage character. These elements I kept, incorporating them into my vision, rather than rejecting them outright because of their source. 6 weeks after the renovation disaster, I moved back into my partially restored home. The kitchen was functional again, with a hybrid of restored original cabinets and carefully selected replacements. The load-bearing wall between the living and dining rooms had been properly repaired, though the non-essential cosmetic work remained to be done. Most importantly, the space felt like mine again, not just legally, but spiritually. As I unpacked my temporary life from Ava's spare room, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Miss Rivers? This is Thomas Harrington from Preservation, Massachusetts. We received your application for the Historic Home Restoration Grant Program." I had almost forgotten the application I'd submitted weeks earlier, more out of desperation than hope. "Yes, that's me," I confirmed, trying to temper my expectations. "I'm pleased to inform you that your project has been selected as one of our grant recipients for this year. The committee was particularly impressed with your commitment to authentic restoration techniques and materials, especially in the face of unusual circumstances. The grant wouldn't cover everything, but it would make a significant dent in the remaining restoration costs. More importantly, it validated my vision for my home, my commitment to preserving its history rather than erasing it for contemporary trends. That evening, as I sat on my porch swing watching the sunset, a car pulled into my driveway. I tensed briefly until I recognized the driver, Drew Hensley, the architectural historian from the Historical Society who'd helped me source period-appropriate moldings. "Hope I'm not intruding," he called as he approached, carrying what appeared to be an old wooden box. "I found something at a salvage auction that made me think of your project." Inside the box was a set of glass doorknobs with brass fittings, nearly identical to the ones Megan had damaged. "They're from a 1923 colonial in Concord that's being renovated," Drew explained. "The new owners wanted modern fixtures, so these were headed for the dumpster. I thought they might find a better home here." As we installed the doorknobs together, Drew sharing stories about each historic home he'd worked on, I felt a sense of rightness that had been missing since the renovation disaster. Here was someone who understood the value of preservation, who saw beauty in the patina of age rather than flaws to be corrected. When he asked me to dinner the following weekend, my acceptance came without hesitation or second-guessing. Whether it led to romance or simply friendship, it represented a new chapter, one where my passions were met with understanding rather than tolerance or contempt. 6 months after returning early from my business trip to find my home under unauthorized renovation, I stood in my fully restored kitchen, morning sunlight streaming through the windows, and felt a profound sense of peace. The journey to this moment had been arduous, expensive, and emotionally taxing, but the result was worth every struggle. My home now reflected a thoughtful balance of historic preservation and modern function. The kitchen retained its period character, with restored cabinetry and vintage-inspired fixtures, while incorporating practical updates like improved storage and energy-efficient appliances designed to mimic older styles. The built-in china cabinet had been painstakingly recreated using salvaged wood from the same era, now displaying my grandmother's dishes alongside contemporary pieces that complemented rather than clashed with the vintage aesthetic. In the living and dining rooms, the original archway had been restored, preserving the distinct spaces while allowing light and conversation to flow between them. The hardwood floors, once covered in construction dust and debris, now gleamed with the patina that only a century of use can create, their occasional imperfections telling stories of generations past. My relationship with my family had undergone a similar restoration process, careful, deliberate, and with clear boundaries about what could be salvaged and what needed to be rebuilt from scratch. The turning point came about 2 months after the incident, when my mother called unexpectedly one evening. "I found something in the attic I thought you might want," she said without preamble. "Some photos of grandmother's house from when I was a child. I never realized how similar your decorating style is to hers." It was as close to an acknowledgement as I was likely to get, not quite an apology, but a recognition of the meaning behind my aesthetic choices, a connection to family history that Megan's intervention had tried to erase. When we met for coffee the following weekend, my mother brought not only the photos but a small box containing vintage drawer pulls that had once adorned my grandmother's kitchen cabinets. "I saved these when they renovated in the 1980 seconds," she explained, somewhat sheepishly. "Always thought they were too pretty to throw away, even if they weren't modern anymore." That conversation opened the door to a new kind of relationship with my parents, one with clearer boundaries and more mutual respect, if not perfect understanding. We established guidelines for visits, always with advance notice, discussed topics previously considered taboo, like how their different treatment of Megan and me had affected us both, and gradually found our way to a more authentic connection. Megan proved more resistant to change. Our interactions remained limited and somewhat strained, though she had eventually, after pressure from our parents and the reality of potential legal action, reimbursed me for the remaining renovation costs. Her Instagram still occasionally featured references to my stubbornly outdated home, but the mockery had lost its sting as I grew more secure in my choices and surrounded myself with people who appreciated them. My social circle had expanded in unexpected ways. Through the historical society and restoration process, I'd met a community of like-minded preservationists who valued craftsmanship and history. Weekend work parties, where friends helped with restoration projects, had become regular social events, filling my home with laughter and camaraderie. And then there was Drew. What began as a shared interest in historic architecture had blossomed into something deeper over the past months. Unlike Jason, who had merely tolerated my quirks, Drew genuinely shared my passion for preservation. Our third date had been spent at an architectural salvage yard, excitedly digging through bins of vintage hardware like children on a treasure hunt. Our fifth, a walking tour of historic homes in Beacon Hill, where we'd spent hours discussing cornices and corbels, while other couples around us took selfies and checked their phones. Tonight, I would be hosting my first dinner party since the renovation disaster. A small gathering Ava and her new girlfriend, Mrs. Patterson, a few friends from the Historical Society, and Drew. The dining room table was set with a mixture of my grandmother's china and contemporary pieces, an arrangement that felt symbolic of the balance I'd found between honoring the past and embracing the present. As I put the finishing touches on the table setting, the doorbell rang. Drew had arrived early as promised, carrying a bottle of wine and a small, carefully wrapped package. Housewarming gift, part 2, he explained with a smile. Or re-housewarming, I suppose. Inside was a custom brass doorplate, hand-engraved with my house's original build date and the words "Restored with Love, 2025. For the front door," he said, suddenly looking uncertain. Too cheesy? It's perfect, I assured him, genuinely moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift. A marker of this chapter of the house's story, and mine. As we installed it together, I reflected on how different this moment was from 6 months ago, standing on my own porch, feeling violated and powerless as my home was transformed against my will. Now, each change was intentional, each restoration a reclaiming of agency, each addition a conscious choice rather than an imposition. When my guests arrived, conversation flowed as easily as the wine. Mrs. Patterson charmed everyone with stories of the neighborhood's evolution over her 50 years in residence. Ava and her girlfriend brought a vintage cake stand they'd found at a flea market, knowing my collection. Friends from the Historical Society discussed upcoming preservation projects with genuine enthusiasm. After dinner, as we gathered in the living room for coffee, Ava raised her cup in an impromptu toast. To Sam, who taught us all something about standing your ground and rebuilding both houses and boundaries. And to finding your people, Drew added, his hand finding mine, the ones who don't try to renovate you without permission. Later, after everyone had gone and Drew and I sat alone on the porch swing, he asked the question that had been lingering unspoken between us. Any regrets? About how everything played out with your family? With Jason? I considered carefully before answering. I regret that it took something so dramatic for me to recognize patterns that had been there all along. But I don't regret setting boundaries, even though it's changed those relationships forever. Some renovations are necessary, he observed. Just better when they're intentional rather than forced. Exactly. And sometimes, clearing away what doesn't work makes space for something better. I leaned against his shoulder, watching fireflies begin to appear in the gathering dusk. I've learned that rebuilding is harder than original construction, whether it's houses or relationships. But the foundation is stronger when you do it right. As we sat in comfortable silence, I thought about how this house had become more than just a structure or an investment. It had become a metaphor for my own journey, preserving what mattered, letting go of what didn't, creating space for new possibilities, while honoring the foundations that supported them. The path forward wasn't perfect or complete. There were still rooms awaiting restoration, family dynamics still finding their new balance, career goals evolving in light of my newfound passion for historic preservation. But for perhaps the first time, I was approaching these ongoing renovations with confidence in my own vision, secure in the knowledge that my space, both physical and emotional, was truly mine to shape. So, have you ever had someone make changes to your life without permission, thinking they knew better than you? What boundaries have you had to set to protect your space, your choices, your vision? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need a reminder that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, the most important home you'll ever restore is the one you build within yourself.